So Derek, can you introduce yourself for the audience in Taiwan?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Derek Evely. I am a coach, sport consultant. I'm the owner operator of eviltracksport.com, and right now, guy living in Chicago, coaching a bunch of athletics, track and field athletes, mainly in the throws.
Love that, love that, love that. So, uh, today I kind of want to ask about the Bondarchuk approach. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, can you give us some thoughts about what exactly is the Bondarchuk model and how is it different with the traditional periodization approach?
Yeah, that's a that's a big question. I don't know how long you want to go, how deep you want to get into it, but the Bondarchuk system or approach to training is quite a bit different. It's almost like in a lot of ways it's like an alternate world or a parallel world to what the traditional models of training and periodization are. It's really, I mean, periodization is just one part of it. It's really just it's an actual, it's like a different training model altogether. Um, and there've been a lot of different names for it, but like some people call it block periodization, which is, if you understand or have read any of Dr. B's books, or if you've taken my course on it online, you know that block is just one method of many different methods that operate within the Bondarchuk system. So block's not a great name for it. I like to call it reverse periodization because there's a number of ways in which the Bondarchuk model is completely different from normal training, traditional methods of training. And one of them is that in traditional methods of training, what you do is or traditional periodization, however you want to call it, methodology. What you do is you you plan out an athlete's training by picking a start date. Okay, so however you pick that, it could be random, it could be traditional date, it could be based upon where your competitions are, and you want a certain number of weeks that you want to, that kind of thing. And then what you do is the athlete starts training, you manipulate volume and intensity and other factors, and you manipulate these to drive adaptation in certain ways. And there's many different ways to do that, many different models, right from the classic Matviev model to more traditional or more contemporary models like the Cheney's model or any others. Um, and you manipulate these different factors to try to create a peak or put an athlete into sport form. In the Bondarchuk method, we kind of turn that around. We don't, so I should back up a bit. So in the traditional models, you might say, okay, we're going to start here and we're going to train for 3 months. And at the end of 3 months, we have a competition, we're going to peak, and you're going to divide that 3 month period into different stages, blocks, whatever method you use. And each one of those stages or blocks represents a different way that you manipulate the training, usually mostly volume and intensity. And usually it involves some kind of overload and then a tapering process and all of that. In the Bondarchuk method, we kind of reverse that. What we do is we don't change volume and intensity. That's the key point. It's the key factor. It's a key element in the whole system. And that's the hardest element that people struggle with. It's the one that people struggle with the most, is that when we present what we call a program, like a workout, a training session, a stimulus, whatever you want to call it, Once we design it and we present it, and there may be more than one, you may have 1, 2, 3, 4 stimulus programs, then we don't change it. We just keep rolling them over. So they will do the same workout over and over and over again. And there's a lot of ins and outs to how you put that together and how you choose volumes and intensities and things like that, but it does not change. So I'm coaching a number of athletes right now. One is a hammer thrower that's I'm coaching her long distance. She's just taken up the hammer. I started with her last August, and she's in her third, what we call a PDSF, which is period of development of sport form. So it's the main cycle that's in the Bondarchuk system. It's the only real cycle used in that, and there's various ways that changes depends on the methods that he uses. But the period of development of sport form, what we do with her, sorry, this athlete is on one program only. So she has one program, that is it. She repeats it. She does it. She's a postgraduate in university. She can train once a day. And so every day she does the same workout. Sounds crazy to a lot of people. And you can't do it in every sport like that. And the more, depending on the sport, the more programs you will have. But she uses one, she repeats it. If you walked into day one of that cycle and you watched her do this, and she is right now, today will be the 44th session that she has done. Okay. You see the exact same workout. It's identical. Nothing has changed. The only thing that's changed is that she should be moving the weights faster, throwing further. Everything should just be better if I've done my job right. Okay. So rather than change volume and intensity, that stays constant. What we do is we changed within the cycle, it stays constant. We might change it between cycle and cycle, but essentially it stays pretty close. But we use exercise change from cycle to cycle to create adaptation or to drive adaptation. And Dr. B says that when you do this and you do this correctly, that when the athlete comes into peak condition, which is typically somewhere between 40 and 50 sessions, or around 50, this girl that I'm talking about, she has been, this is her third PDSF with me, and she is coming into form right now, exactly the same as she did on the other two cycles. She's been growing for the last 20 sessions. I figure she'll have another 10 to 12 sessions, but she peaks typically within 50, somewhere between 52 and 57 sessions or something like that with throwing. And so that's how so that's in a nutshell how it works. Okay. And so we don't change anything from day to day, and we just, and then what we do is because we do it in the throws, we can measure every day our where the athlete's at. We're lucky that way. We also use bar velocity to measure. I measure that in many different ways, and I track that. And I found that the growth that they get in throwing distance, that reaction. And if you've studied Bondarchuk, you know that there's typically 3 different reactions that athletes respond with when you present the stimulus and you go out that far, over, up to around 50 sessions or so, give or take 10 sessions, that they typically will respond in one of 3 different ways. Okay, but they all end up in a peak condition, all 3. And that's a long conversation, and I go through it in depth in the course, but it's quite interesting. But so, and this girl who started throwing with me last August. She's 26 years old, and she had her first meet 2 weeks ago, and she had a 7-meter PB. And she had a foul that would have made a 9-meter PB, which is pretty huge growth. I mean, I've never had anybody grow that much in a year, even a beginner. So she's responding very well to it.
So, you mentioned that you use like velocity based training to track the bar velocity. So at at the beginning when I like got introduced to the velocity based training, the concept is like not, let's say one RM is gonna change daily, right? So if it's the same program or if it's the same like intensity and volume, how does the velocity gonna change, or is it
How does the bar velocity factor into what I'm
yeah,
doing?
sorry.
Okay, so yeah, that's interesting. So about 10 years ago, I was coaching a number of women hammer throwers back in Canada. I live in Chicago now, but I was living in Canada, and one of the issues we have with the Bondarchuk system in Canada is that what do you do when you're in the winter if you're throwing indoors into a net or something, or you can't get that measurement every day, and um, so how do you measure peak condition? The only other way you could do it is through the more specific exercises. So you could measure, like, I mean, assuming you had the room to do it, you could say do a shot heave, or measure that. You want something fairly specific, but there's other things that you can use. And so, but that's when these devices were really becoming popular at that time. And so I was thinking about it, and I thought, well, if we're not changing the weight of the lifting and it stays the same throughout the entire cycle, why couldn't we just measure the speed of the bar, just like we measure the distance of the hammer or the discus or the shot put in workout, and track it and use that? But there's a big assumption there, and the assumption is that the curve that you get from bar velocity is going to mimic the curve that you're going to get from your throwing data. Okay. So, and I didn't know that. I didn't know if it would or not. You would assume it would, because if they grow into a full peak condition, they should come into peak condition with everything. So what I did is I bought a couple of push bands. I started using it. And that's exactly what I found. I found that not only does the athlete, generally speaking, come into peak condition at the same time as they do with their throwing distances, do they come into it with the bar velocities, but all the different individual peaks and valleys, and the different mini peaks and earlier peaks, because that's a really interesting conversation too, is how those are similar from one PDSF to another. I found that those were the same, and that was stunning to me. They were really shocking. And so ever since then, I've been using it, and I haven't been using it not just for measuring peak condition when we're indoors. And this girl I was just talking about, her second PDSF, all of her throwing, all 58 sessions or something like that she did in that cycle, were all indoors. I don't have one hammer measurement, but I do have all of her bar velocities. And so I just use that. But I also started using it all the time. Started measuring every day. I measure, not on every lift, sometimes 2 lifts if it's bench. If it's a shot putter, I'll do it with bench or some kind of press, maybe if I have that in the program, and some kind of global strength ability, like some kind of squat, step up, lunge, Olympic lift, something like that. So I measure it all, whatever the main key lifts are, and I track them together, and I use it as backup. Like I use it, like it also, because there's a lot of variation from day to day, especially early on in these cycles. One of the key indicators that an athlete is coming into peak condition is that variance from day to day and the result starts to get really narrow, right? Like every day starts to get good. And that's what Dr. B calls a true peak condition, is with using this method, when you don't taper, your body has actually adapted to the stimulus. And then of course, when you get there, you have to change everything. That's another discussion. But rather than, and this is what his belief is that in traditional periodization, when you load, and then the athlete starts going into a goes into competition season, or it's coming up to where you want them to peak, then you unload them, and of course the result is going to go up. But he says that's a he calls it a false peak. Not that it's not legitimate, and many people have done it, and it works very well. But this one, in this style, we don't taper, because the athlete has fully adapted to the training. It just takes a long time, 50 sessions of the same thing. And you find that it's easier peak to control because there's less variance. They feel good all the time. The key though is that once they start going down, because once they adapt to it, they're not going to adapt. They're not going to stay adapt. They're not going to stay at that peak forever. It'll last. It's individual, but it'll last 1 to 2 weeks. Then you got to make a decision as to what you're going to do, whether you're going to try to do the whole thing over again, like another PDSF, or you're going to go into maintenance or something like that. But that's a long conversation.
Can I like understand it this way? For like traditional approach, when you go to like let's say max strength and like power phase and then taper, it's more of a neural adaptation. So after like let's say after a few weeks of like not training max strength, the max strength is gonna go down. After a few weeks you didn't train like speed, the speed's gonna go down. But the Bondarchuk approach, it's basically like letting people get stronger because everything we did is the same. So we actually adapt to everything we did. Am I right? Or
Yeah, so that's really interesting you bring that up, because with this girl, her name's Nia Britt. And I've been playing around doing a lot of experimentation with her, and I have a colleague who is very good at using the system in California. His name is Nick Garcia. I consider him to be one of the greatest, most knowledgeable throws coaches around. Even though he coaches at a private high school, he's quite amazing. He uses this system with all of his athletes. He actually uses both traditional and Bondarchuk, depending on whether they can do Bondarchuk, if they, it's whether or not it's feasible enough to do it with them. But he generally, when he can, he does. And him and I have been discussing this a lot lately, and I'm also going over the results with Nia. Has the strength and conditioning coach at Iowa, where she lives, has taken the Bondarchuk course, and so his name's Cody Roberts, and so he's helping me manage it on his end, because I'm not there all the time. I'm hardly there. And so he helps me sort the loads and things like that. And, we've been studying this. So what I did with her in this last cycle, which is quite interesting. And I started to really play around with how I set the bar velocity loads a couple of years ago. And what I decided was, and this is how we use it, I wouldn't say what we do is BVT training, because I don't really know what BVT training or bar velocity. I know it represents a certain methodology, and from the way I understand it, what it is You do exactly sort of the opposite of what we do. You change the load on a day-to-day basis to keep them within a zone, right? Okay. So we don't do that. So what I do is at the beginning of a cycle, once I pick some exercises, once I say, okay, so for Nia on this one, she's doing a box squat. Okay. Probably I call it a box squat. It's really what she's doing. We're using a box to set the depth. I don't want her to go full in this. I will use full squats, but I wouldn't. But we are going into competition phase, so I want more of like a half squat or just below 90-degree, sort of squat. So because we are measuring the velocity every day, I need that range to be consistent. So we use a box with a pad on it, right? I'm doing this with a number of athletes, and Nick is doing this with one of his athletes right now. And so what I do is in the first day that we do the session, I have the warm up. So I do a warm up set, and I use GymAwares now. Okay. So we have the GymAwares set up, and we train in this metal container. It has a steel ceiling. So the GymAwares are up top, and so they're all, they're there. And what I do is the first day I load them. Well, the first thing is I want them to be like, I'll just pick whatever zone I want them to be. So let's say for that next PDSF, I want them to be in the strength speed zone, which is usually where I used to stay at, right? It's like because we're doing the same lift every day, to go heavy max strength every day might be a little difficult, but I'm going to get to that in a second because we've done some interesting experimenting with it. So, but up until this last cycle, the current cycle we're in now, what I've done is so strength speed is typically 0.80 to 1.0. I'm right there, right? Okay. So what I do on the first day is I have them warm up with this squat, whatever exercise it is. But for Nia right now, it's this box squat. So she goes down, does a set of 5. She'll warm up, then we'll do a heavier set, and then I start looking at the speeds. So they'll be very fast at first, especially after the warm-up set. They'll be really quick, and we just keep loading until those reps, the set average, and it's a bit of a guess. It's not really a guess, but it's like a bit of a judgment call as to what the actual load's going to be. And Cody in Iowa, I got to hand it to him. He's been very good and helpful with doing this because I'm not there. Usually I'm there. With her, I'm not there. And he's made some on the day of really interesting calls with her squats that have worked out very, very, very well. So what I do is we keep loading it. We might end up doing like 4 or 5 sets, and we just keep loading until the bar speeds generally are just below the zone I want to be at. So when I want to work through the strength speed zone on day 1, I will have them do I'll set the load. We will find a load that is generally around 0.75 for most of the reps. Okay, like it's like we change the exercises within each cycle. So a formal box squat she hadn't done, or any kind of a squat she hadn't done in almost a year. Okay, so there's a little variation there, but I guess and some of it's gut and things like that. But we picked a load. For her, it was 275 pounds for 5. Okay, so I forget what the actual numbers were for those 5 reps when we got that, but it was, Cody made that judgment call. Like the last rep might be quite slow because, she hasn't done squats in a while and it's getting heavy, right? But in my example, we're talking about strength speed. So I will set it at about 0.75, and whatever that load is, let's say it's for argument's sake, it's 225 pounds. Okay, it's 2 plates on each side. Then that will be the set weight for the next 50 sessions that she's lifting when they do that exercise. And her job, or the athlete's job, is to just move it faster and faster. And what I expect them to do, which I've seen every single time I've done this, is they will go right through that zone. So by the end of it, I would expect them to be in the 1.0 range. So we choose a weight that at session one, and sometimes you got to adjust it in the first week. It depends. You might have to move it at 10, 20 pounds either way. It doesn't, it's not a big deal. But once within the first workout or two, we set the weight, and then we record the speeds. I typically will do a warm-up set and then either give them a heavier warm-up set and then 2 sets of the formal weight, or like with Nia, she just goes prior to this current cycle, and I'll get to that in a second. She would do a warm-up set, and then the next 3 sets would be at that load. And her job is to just move it as fast as she can and then send me the results, and I graph it. And I would expect her to go right through. I record the fastest rep and the set average. Okay. The best set average and the fastest rep of the day, those 2 marks on mean velocity. And I expect it to go right. I expect over 50 sessions for her to go up at least into 1.0. So I would expect 20 centimeters per second growth throughout the 50 cycles. And typically and that's worked over and over for me. But this cycle, what I decided to do, I decided to experiment with something different. And like I said, Nick Garcia and I have talked a lot about this, and he's experimenting with it too. And what we've done is, I thought, well, why just limit it to one zone? Why can't I do the same thing with a number of different zones? So what I did was, she has a warm-up set, maybe 2. And then the first real set, I actually had her on day 1 when she was measuring. I said to Cody, I said, listen, I was there, of course. So I said, find a weight that is around 0.45, 0.5, right at the sort of, I want it as heavy as you can get away with and still get 5 reps in, right? Not to failure. We never go to failure, right? But, it's going to drop off a bit, but generally just use your gut, read the push, the results, and use your gut. And I want a weight that's somewhere around there. And then what I want her to do is of course, with that first set, that's the first, well, let's call it the first real set after the warm-up sets. That's her max, what starts off as her max strength set. And this gets really interesting. And I wasn't totally expecting what was going to happen. So she does this, and then so we started at about 0.45, 0.5. The next set is like 0.2. We picked a load that started off about 0.2 meters per second faster. And then the third set about, which was strength speed. So essentially what we started with was a set that started off in the max, just at the sort of mid zone of the max strength zone. The next one was sort of at the lower end of the accelerative strength zone. And then the last set was just like what I just described with the strength speed zone. So, and these 3 loads turned out to be, they were all 5 reps of the same, obviously, the same exercise. So what we did was, so they were all 5 reps, and she's doing the same thing. So she does one, what start off as max strength, one accelerative strength in the middle of it, okay, and she blew through each zone. So the idea was that she would start off at max strength. She might even go deeper into max strength because, or any of the zones, because not everybody goes up like straight up. Like they don't, like, if you know the reaction curves, it's not a straight linear improvement. There are dips. And with Nia, there's always a dip around after 20 sessions. She has a peak at 6 sessions, a peak at around 20 sessions, a major peak. Then it really drops off, and and for about 10 sessions, and then it goes, and then the next 20, 25, the next 20, 25 sessions, she goes straight up. Okay. Generally speaking. So what we found was that she blew right out of with the mat. Oh, sorry. I know what I was going to say. Sorry. Been a long week. The max, the load was 275 pounds for the max strength times 5. The next one was 225 times 5. And the last set was 185 times 5. Okay. Well, now she's at, like I said, I think yesterday was set 43, and she had a PB yesterday with her best rep max strength. You're not going to believe this. This is crazy. She is moving the max strength load faster than she was moving the strength speed load. So she is moving 275 pounds faster than she was moving for her best rep. And I think her set average faster than she was moving 185 at the beginning. That's, I don't know, man. I mean, I'm not the world's, I mean, I'm not Brian Mann. I'm not the world's biggest expert. I would love to talk to Brian about this, actually. And I've talked to Brian privately. Him and I've had some conversations. He was a big help when I was learning this. But I would love to get his input on that, because that's incredible growth. Like for that kind of a load, 275 pounds, she's moving it. I think it's around, she's grown almost a foot per second faster. So she's moving it like 30 centimeters faster than she was 44 sessions ago. And the other 2 loads have done the same thing. I mean, her accelerative strength zone is started off at like 0.65, I think 0.65, and is now she's actually hit 0.9 with that load. And her strength speed, she started off at 0.75 or thereabouts, and her best to date is 1.1.
That was incredible.
That's 35 centimeters faster, and you're talking full intent here, like always full intent, right? So think about that. So like whatever it was, like 2.5 months ago when she started this, she was moving 185 for 5 reps as fast as she could, and now she's moving almost 100 pounds more that speed.
Whoa, crazy.
So that's, I've never seen growth like that.
Yeah.
I've seen, I always see a good point too. So this whole idea, and the beauty of it is that I'm hitting all these zones, right? So it's not like I'm staying in one zone. I'm hitting all the zones. So she's getting a bit of, a fair dose of max strength through the cycle, accelerative strength, speed strength. And I think now or strength speed, I think, and her strength speed weights are dipping now into the speed strength. So somewhere in there throughout the cycle, she's hitting pretty much everywhere she needs to, or she possibly could on the force velocity curve, other than, being completely unloaded or eccentric loads, right? What are your thoughts on that? I mean, because you're the first person I've told this to, right? I have a little chat group with Louise Mesquita, who's been on my podcast, and Cody, and two other strength and conditioning people, Vicky Bender and Juan. Oh Jesus, sorry, Juan. If you're listening to this, I know I'm having a brain fart here. Yeah, and I've been sharing these results with these people online, but you're the first person I've actually explained it to publicly, so it's pretty interesting stuff to me. Like, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, first of all, like thank you for sharing this to me. I
Mhm.
really love it. And I think it's amazing. If I put, let's say if I'm a traditional strength and conditioning coach and looking at
Mhm.
this, it was like it's gonna be like crazy.
Mhm.
But let's say if I'm a if I'm a like novel just got into the strength and conditioning world and look at this, and I think it's pretty pretty cool, and I think it I mean I should probably work that. I should probably use this method.
Well, yeah. Is your podcast primarily YouTube, or is it audio as well?
YouTube and like Apple Podcasts.
Okay, so do you want me to share some of the graphs?
Sure, sure,
Screen
sure,
share?
sure, sure, sure.
Okay, so you'll probably have to edit this, but or I'll just let you do it. But I'm going to share my screen right now. Okay,
Okay, sure.
it says disabled participant screen sharing.
Wait a sec. How about now?
There we go. Okay. Oh, okay. I have to configure mine. Hang on a second here. There we go. Okay.
It kind of blew my mind, man.
Yeah. This is I
Yeah,
okay, hang on. Let me view this. Okay. Don't show this one. This doesn't show much. This is just okay. So I'm gonna do. Okay. So here's the cycle that let me zoom in here. Oh, maybe yeah. Okay, can you see this?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so this is the cycle here. Um, um, this is the best rep. Okay, so this is the best rep of the of each of the three sets that I described. The blue is the max strength. The orange is the whatever it went started in accelerative strength and went right up through strength. It's in now in the strength speed zone, and the strength speed is the gray that goes right up. Okay, so um, so as you can see here, right, like after about right around here is about 20 sessions, she drops, and that's typical for her, very typical. I'll show you. I'll show you in a second these set averages compared to the last three. Um, a comparison of all three PDSFs that we've done, which is really quite interesting. But anyways, here it is. So you can see here that this point here, she went 0.7. She's gone 0.7 now twice for the load of 275 pounds. And she is above her worst day. She's not above where she started, but she's above her worst day. I guess I misspoke there. She's above her worst day, her lowest day in the strength speed zone. Okay. So she's started at, what did she start at? What was the first day here? It was the best rep on the first day was 0.48. Okay. And now her best rep is 0.70. So she's gone 0.22 growth in max strength. Okay. But that on the best rep. Okay. And then you can see, the growth, and that's a lot of growth for max strength because that's slower, right? Like it's heavier. So, and here she started at 0.66 on day one, and her best so far, and this, I guarantee you, this is going to get better. Okay. Because she hasn't peaked yet. you see, it looks like she's peaked here and she's gone down, but as I'll show you in a second, this is normal, and then she'll go back up again, and then she'll hit her actual final peak. So here she started at 0.66, and then and she has hit as high as 0.9 with that. And this, what is this one? 1.0, I think I said 1.1. Yeah, 1.08 with the strength speed, and she started that at right on 0.76. So you can see the growth, and each one of these dots and all three of these is exactly the same, right? Okay, now if we look at this one, this is really interesting. This is set averages. Look at the growth of the set averages. So her set average in max strength at the beginning was 0.40, and now she's gone 0.68. So she's grown 0.28 in max strength over the date geez, so what is it? It's been about 2 months. Okay. And here 0.60 to 0.85, 0.25, and 0.70 to 0.94. So it's typically somewhere between 0.2 and 0.3 meters per second growth that I'm getting. But I'm really quite surprised at I'm very surprised at the max strength, at the growth in it. And this is the best set average of each day. Okay. And then the last one I have here this is an interesting one. So what this is, I thought, what the hell? I like to play around with Excel sometimes. So this one is the growth of, so there's two lines here. The bottom one, the maroon one, is an average of her best set averages. So you know how we have the three different weights, okay? And we measure the best from each set, the fastest rep, and we measure the set average. Well, I take an average of those three across the three different weights, right? So I average out the 270. I take the best set average, not the set average, because there's only one each day. The set average of the 275, the 225, and the 185, and I average those three out, and that's what this mark is. So to me, this is kind of like a across the board growth. I don't know if it really means anything, but I just thought it would be interesting to measure. And look, and this is the growth here, which is quite crazy, right? So she's gone. Oh, and the blue is the same thing. It's just the best rep. So it's the three best reps of the day averaged out. And here it's 0.63, and her best so far is 0.86. So she's gone so everything is around between 0.2 and 0.25 growth. Okay. Yeah. What did she grow here? 0.57 to 0.79. Yeah. 0.22 as well. So, I mean, I collect a lot of this, but it's, once you get the Excel file set up, it's quite easy but it all tells me basically the same thing, right? It just gives me, they're just, and over, it's just, once you have it set up, it's easy. It's not like it takes a lot of time, but yeah. So now here's something really cool. This is an average of the last three PDSFs. Okay. So this is only the best set average. So this is the best set average of the day, but in the strength speed zone. So this is all strength speed. Okay. So the yellow is PDSF 1, which she did step ups in. That was from August to November of last year. The orange is clean pulls from November to, I think, to February of this year. Okay. And the gray one is the current one. Okay. This is a dynamic squat, box squat that we're doing now, okay? And I've compared them, I've lined them up at the exact same, they're lined up exactly at the same session number, okay? In the clean pulls in the second one, for whatever, we lost the data of the first 4 sessions or something like that. So that's why it starts here. But there were 4 sessions before that. I just don't have the data, so I didn't put it in. But anyways, but here's something interesting, right? Like, she tends to peak, like on each one of them, she has these little mini peaks. And in the step ups, it came, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. On session 8, here it's session 6. This one it's session 6. Okay, and that's really normal. Some of these other little peaks here, they're kind of, they're a little more random. But this early first peak around session 6 to session 8, super common. I see it with everybody. Okay. The other one I see is around 20 sessions. And I think that is somewhere around here. I think this is the number 18. Okay. So here in the, so you can see it was a bit minor here with the step ups. Now, remember, the step ups were, they're step ups. So they're not, she's going full intent every time, but it was a high rep load. I think it was 4 sets of 10 alternating. This is interesting too. The clean pulls was only sets of 3, 4 sets of 3, and this is 4 sets of 5. So those are 3 very different loading parameters, and yet we see pretty similar reaction. I mean, don't you think? I'm going to send it.
Yeah.
And
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and so you see this, there's basically growth up in each one. There's growth up to somewhere around 20 sessions, a little longer with the step ups. Then it goes down, then there's a drop, and then it goes up. And then there's always a peak around 30 sessions, 31, 32. So in this one, this one's, it's a bit later with the set. Now, remember, this is just set averages. Okay. Sometimes if you look at the best rep, I think they usually come a bit earlier, but here, so 0.39, there's a peak here, 0.35, and here, 0.33. Okay. So, and this is just bar velocity. I do the same thing for the throws, but with the clean pulls here, we didn't measure any of the throws because she threw indoors, and I don't have a lot of data for here as well because it was so cold. She's only got probably 10, 12 days in, but it basically, it follows the same reaction. So.
Get it.
Okay, so this is what it looks like. This is what we're doing. It's been going very well. So
I love that. So, uh,
and
what
you can
if
see.
like,
Go ahead.
because like the traditional approach is based on uh based on like not letting athlete to get like overread to get like overtraining.
Mm-hmm.
But in this model, we see that it's not going to happen with like the same load, the same intensity, and the same volume. It's not like it basically just said that overtraining is
I know
not
what
going to
you're
happen.
saying.
Am I right?
Yeah, you have to pick the loads carefully, right? Like you have to pick the key thing with this is to pick the exercise. Number one, my first and most important decision is what weights of hammers I'm going to pick for the next cycle, from cycle to cycle, because it has to change from cycle to cycle. Then it's the special exercises, then it's the weight room exercises. But I look at, and then it's a general exercises, which really is irrelevant. I just have to change it. That's all. But I found that this over the past this dynamic squat at these intensities, through the strength speed zone has always been kind of my go-to scheme going into competition, going into where I need them to throw far, right? So this is a little different because I'm doing that, but I'm also doing it in accelerative strength and in max strength. But you have to pick the load. When I say the load, I mean the overall load of the program, everything, the number of throws, number of special exercises, and the amount, we only do 1 or 2 key lifts. That's it. And then we do a general strength circuit, which is like ancillary strength circuit at the end, which is, a lot of trunk twists and shoulder type of strength, right? A lot of it's prophylactic in nature. And so, but I look at that whole program. That's the workout. It's the program. You have to pick that load. I look at it as in its entirety very carefully. It has to be enough that it's going to stimulate adaptation, but not so much it's going to crush them if they do it every day, right? So, with that takes a bit of experimentation and a bit of experience. But with hammer throwers or throwers in general, I have that pretty dialed in with most people. I know pretty much exactly what it's going to be, within a few degrees kind of thing. So, but yeah, so you have to be careful with it. You can't go in and give them, you can't give them, like in a lot of traditional lifting programs, you'll see 4 or 5 key lifts, and a ton of weight room work, because they won't survive. They won't be able to do it. We're very, very SWAT in what we do. And one of the reasons why a lot of people kind of shy away from this is that they get so attached to certain exercises, and they're like, well, how can I just can't not do bench press, or I can't not do, Olympics. Well, she just grew 9 meters and she's only done Olympics once, 1 out of 3 cycles. Okay. And what I say to those people when they say that, and I get why they do, is I say, you have to remember something. With a full-time athlete who's not working, they'll do this twice a day. They'll do it. So the time to peak condition won't be 2 months or 2.5 months. It'll be 5 weeks, 5 to 6 weeks. And I say to them, look, you got to remember, in 6 weeks, you're going to have an opportunity to put in whatever exercise you want again, right? So it's not like we do squats all year round. We put them in strategically where we want them, and and as you saw, when I showed you the comparison of these charts, this one right here, sorry, as you can see here, step ups early on, I will go with something unilateral or contralateral. Then I went to an Olympic to see to see how she would react to that. And now I've gone to my key one and going into competition. And her previous PB in the hammer, before this year, was 60.99 meters. And she opened up with 68.83. So, so that's almost 8 meters of growth.
Nice.
So it's, it's pretty good.
Yeah,
I mean,
man.
I've never had anybody grow that much.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Not at 26 years old.
Yeah.
Now she, to be fair, she hasn't, she threw hammer in college, but she was more of a shot putter. So she was very trainable, but still, it's insane amount of growth.
Nice. So, Derek, I know I send you a list of questions, but
I know we got way off topic.
no, it's okay. I love that. I love that. And to be honest, I have to be honest. I have to listen to this again so I can
well, we can do a follow-up on it.
yeah, of course. I need to like listen to this again to like absorb everything you mentioned, and we can do a follow-up.
Yeah. And I think I have a lot. I mean, I've been wanting to show this to a lot of colleagues. So I'm glad we had the opportunity to do
Yeah.
this, because now I could just point them to the podcast and they can look at it.
Yeah.
You know.
So, for those who are interested in what we're talking about today, where can they reach out to you?
The course is on my website at eviltracksport.com. That's now it's Evil Track is the most screwed up name, but it's a long story. But it's EVELTRAK sport.com. All my Bondarchuk course, and I have a number of other lectures from different experts in track and field and strength and conditioning. They can go there to find the information, and yeah.
Cool.